Hello and welcome to another podcast from Dell Technology. Today, I'm very fortunate to be joined by Smit Patel. And Smit, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure to see you. So, Smit, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself, please, and on how you ended up where you are today, and what brought you into the world of digital medicine, and what drew you to Dime in particular.
Absolutely happy to share. I'm Smit Patel, clinician by background, and over the decade, seeing this growth of advent of new digital technologies and how this fabric of healthcare and technologies was coming together was one of the primary factors of always fascinated by how can these new tools in the toolbox can supplement clinician myself, colleagues in the clinical realm to do our jobs better in thinking through how do we serve better and how do we take care of our patients around the field. So a little bit about me. I'm a clinician by background, have been around the field with a decade of experience in pharma to health tech startup space consulting, and then joined Dime early in the days of pandemic, essentially to build one of their largest clinical arm within Dime. So Dime, or Digital Medicine Society, we are a global nonprofit dedicated to advancing safe, effective, and ethical use of digital tools and essentially a professional home for digital medicine. Um, what my role at Dime is looking into how do we think about integrating a lot of these digital tools in a more effective, efficient, equitable, and safe way, all the way from building the first public-private partnership in digital oncology space with Moffitt Cancer Center and White House, to thinking around and working with the largest healthcare system here in the US, or the Veterans Health Administration, to develop more consistent approaches on deploying these new digital health technologies at scale across the 170 medical centers that VA has, all the way to working with our international colleagues. For example, we had a partnership with Health Innovation Hub for German Ministry of Health. So as they are thinking on global priorities, advancements of innovation with evidence generation, how do we look at more broad acceptance of those digital technologies? And in the I usually say fun time when I am not working. I love to support in the advisory capacity with communities, working alongside the Economist Impact, the Brown Life Science Center for Digital Health, Harvard Business Review School, and various programs and committees in advancing these new tools, technologies, programs to drive digital innovation forward.
So tell me, has Dime become a powerful force in shaping digital health ecosystems? What do you see as the society's most important contribution to date?
Absolutely. So we take our pride in collaborating with ecosystem. We have partnered with over 500 organizations, all the way ranging from tech industry, life science and pharma, health systems, payers, regulatory colleagues, public entities and agencies from FDA, CMS, White House, to our clinician colleagues, so physician scientists, ethicists, patient communities, specifically at the center of the core. And we bring together to solve some of the hairiest problems that we encounter today. So how we do that is in three form, and I'll share you some examples. One is our supervisor, as I said, is convening and collaborating, because right now, or in the past, how we have seen healthcare happening is in the silos. And we are not here just to admire the problems, but rather how do we uniquely bring the right stakeholders at the table to bring multiple perspectives to change and build resources and tools that will drive and facilitate the actions of our colleagues and stakeholders together. So our flagship products, for example, the V3 framework, which was built to validate and verify a lot of sensor-based DHTs and digital health technologies in the place that has been used by over 100 different stakeholders and organizations, including our regulatory colleagues' acceptance from FDA to EMA, to our life science industries who are using for drug development products and medical device development products for analytical testing, clinical validation, etc., to some of our flagship products in clinical care deliveries. We have multiple playbooks we have built in pediatric healthcare. Right now, we are working on AI implementation. We have built health system delivery playbooks so that individuals, care colleagues can use these to implement various different tools into their resource settings to drive clinical progress forward in the most effective, efficient, and equitable way. And we also, apart from that, bring healthcare stakeholders to build and lead. Because at the same point, right information can help a lot of clinical colleagues to drive right value proposition forward. So how do we build action-oriented resources? And we have a suite of over 1,000+ resources and 800+ case studies of how individuals are implementing these into their daily lives. And that's how we drive progress forward with show, don't tell approach.
Okay, so one of Dime's big focus areas is building trust in digital endpoints. How do you see the field evolving to assure that digital tools are clinically meaningful and with regulatory support?
One of the first things we look at and think through is what are the endpoints that matter to the patients. And we, at Dime, we have a library of digital endpoints that we started early in the days of Dime's establishment, essentially as digital endpoint fields was growing. And we learned that there are multiple different sponsors and over 400 different digital endpoints that are used across various different clinical and therapeutic areas in different phase 1, 2, and 3 trials across different medical product developments through drugs and devices. So when we look at digital endpoints, what we also saw is as the field grew for digital healthcare, digital endpoints field grew. And Stephen, one of the things that we saw through our library of digital endpoints is the fact that there was this growing need across industry where we saw 40 different kinds of measures of sleep. Between you and I, we can think about that there are maybe 5 or 7 different kinds of measures of sleep latency, uninterruptedness of the sleep, how long a meaningful measure of sleep could look like. But there are not 40 different interesting ways of measuring sleep. So essentially, what we did is over the last year or so, we had brought together to identify core measure sets of sleep, looking into what matters to the patients. How can we devise across industry, life science to tech to platform developers, what are those core measures of sleep that we can agree upon together and release those resources? So our core measures of sleep project release resources to identify what is the right meaningful measures of sleep, creating ontologies, how do we measure it, what are the right tools and technologies to do that, and how do we operationalize it? Same model we have implemented for physical activity. How across COPD, across various rare diseases, what are the right physical activity measures that are in place or should be in place to do that? That we have scaled the program and the progress across even therapeutic areas. So looking at atopic dermatitis, nocturnal scratch. How do we use digital endpoints through Alzheimer's disease? We never had a validation metrics. We were using a subjective validation matrix that was last validated in 1970s. We changed that approach, looking into digital measurements on objective areas of measures. So we're constantly looking into what are the pain points right now with our core life science industries as they are building new products, with our digital health developers as they are designing new objective sensor-based using sensor-based technologies to create novel approaches to measurement. What are those looks like? And over the next few months, we'll be looking at mental health, we'll be looking at diabetes and more different programs to essentially use digital endpoints to drive subjective measures and power health a little bit better.
Okay, so from a policy and reimbursement perspective, what are the biggest blockers you see for widespread adoption of digital biomarkers and remote monitoring?
That's a great question. I think because the digital endpoint field as a whole is new, it's not something that has been established like the world of drugs for the last 2 to 3 decades. There are arenas where validation of digital endpoints, qualification of a lot of these endpoints, and then utilization and creation of the value of these endpoints are some of the core challenges. And how we have tackled these challenges is bringing our clinical, regulatory, and payer colleagues at the table at the right time. So Data CC, which is one of our collaborative community, which is an official FDA collaborative community, a lot of these measure products that we just discussed sits under the Data CC's portfolio. So what does that mean? Usually, when we do a lot of these programs and digital endpoints and core measure sets projects, our regulatory colleagues at the table, our patients are at the table, who helps us identify what matters to the patients, our payer colleagues at the table, so that as we are creating these new core sets, pair colleagues are understanding what is the right value. And there was one project that we did called 3Ps, which essentially convened various different pair colleagues together to understand what are the core impediments that exist when we think about the value creation of these digital endpoints and how our pair colleagues can use for better data-driven decision making. So when we tackle different initiatives, and I think we are flying the plane as we are building it. What we try to do is bring multiple stakeholders together at the table, and once we have that agreement of these endpoints can have significant value through patients' lens, through clinicians' lens on a clinical value, through regulatory lens, having regulators at the table, and through the lens of the economic value, having pairs at the table have always helped us to drive this progress forward.
So, Smith, DIME is widely recognized as a global convener and trusted non-profit at the forefront of digital health innovation. With such a clear pulse on the industry, you've led some important work to assess the regulatory needs facing digital health developers. Could you share how this research shaped further developments and further initiatives to support the ecosystem?
Happy to. Um, Keeping a pulse on the regulatory development from the regulatory science and policies, some of the bread and butter of time. And essentially to look at when we were thinking about advancements, there's so many things, especially evolution on the regulatory science happening in current state, but also in the last few years. And to think through in a more thoughtful approach and prioritize a lot of our actions, Dime had actually conducted a digital health industry needs assessment to do two things. One is are we driving successful digital health product development and adoption from the industry front? And two,
Yes.
how can regulatory policy um, facilitate these much needed developments from the public side of the shop? So our goal was prioritization on driving action, not just with the speed, but rather with the right direction. So what we did is we convened over 86 different individuals from 65 plus organizations in a series of 3 workshops. They were followed by a survey to probe them to help us identify some of the key themes, findings, directions, and priorities. We identified many different priorities across this workshop and survey, all the way looking from international harmonization to third-party large language model requirements, etc. But three things, the top three findings were one, the need for the FDA or regulatory alignment with payer decision making. Two, how do we think about a clear alternate pathway for products to market, especially for truly novel digital products? And then three, um, how can there be better communication and coordination across the regulatory divisions within FDA, cross center clarity, etc. And I think these led to some of the future work that Dime led.
Okay, so the regulatory landscape for digital health technologies is in flux. I think we're all agreed to that. It's dynamic, it's evolving, and at times it's uncertain. In your view, how can high quality developers distinguish their products and stand out in this very complex environment?
Absolutely. One of the things that Dime has done, and Stephen, as you mentioned, today, one of the largest problem that digital health industry face, specifically on the buyer side, so health systems, payers, employers, as they're looking into the market, there are over 300,000 healthcare software applications that are out in the market. What that means is what's good and what's not good is up to the stake of individuals to determine. So what we did here at Dime is we created something called as Dime Seal. So we reviewed over 1,000 plus scientific literatures, looked at close to 50 different regulatory guidances, over 112 standards, industry standards and quality programs, and talked to over 150 industry experts to think about how do we differentiate a high quality digital health software product from one that's not. And that's where that gave birth to Dime Seal, which is a symbol of quality and trust that's awarded to digital health software products that demonstrates a performance that's against a comprehensive framework that we have built with the best practices in evidence, clinical and economic evidence. Privacy and security, having the right security measures in place, usability and equity that's woven throughout and not as an afterthought to once a product is being developed. And we have an upcoming announcement to further support these software products with the clinical applications here in the US.
Okay, so being at the cutting edge of digital health evaluation comes with significant responsibilities. How is Dime positioning itself to support both established players and emerging innovators in navigating these challenges?
Um, Evaluation is not for the faint of heart, especially with a growing market. And we're doing it in two format. So one is we recently last month launched these resources as part of a pre-competitive collaborative that we had organized called Integrated Evidence Plan for Digital Health Products. And the second is through our group of network experts that we had convened from payers, health systems, that build a new evaluation framework to assess clinical evaluation through evidence-defined framework. So let me walk you through two different ones
Okay.
for innovators who are listening. One, through the integrated evidence plan, essentially what's happening right now in the industry is we identified a need that a lot of solution developers and a lot of innovators were overly focusing their evidence on evidence generation just for regulatory decision maker. And what it does is they miss the opportunity to make their clinical studies and the the evidence package more efficient and effective for downstream decision makers, for payers, for implementers who are going to implement these digital tools, leading to significant cost in evidence generation, leading to delays in commercials, and sometimes um, commercial failures. So this integrated evidence plan project, what it did is it convened stakeholders from payers, regulators, innovators, all at the table to identify what does good look like when we think about evidence-based products? How do we think about clinical, economic, and healthcare value all at the same time? And we created a resources that includes an IP toolkit that walks individual through more so a how-to roadmap that helps them build an evidence plan starting early on when they are mapping their product, when they're building the MVP, when they are designing their target product profile and competitive analysis. When should they engage with the right stakeholders? What are the right requirements? And then there's a stage two that goes into the deep dive on what's the right evidence requirements, how to build strategies, a whole high quality evidence checklist that they can walk through from safety, from effectiveness, from clinical value, economic value, privacy, security, usability, equity considerations through criterias that can help them build a robust evidence package. And this toolkit also connects them once they have built a evidence packet. How do they connect to a commercial claim? So when they are talking to a payer, when they're talking to HTA bodies, what are the right value metrics? What are the right pathways to go to the market? What are the right commercial strategies that individual based on their digital solutions that they can use to design that? So it's a comprehensive package that redefines not thinking about evidence in a piecemeal, but rather thinking evidence in an integrated format that increases the probability of their success of robust product, but also for right adoption and commercialization. So that's the piece of integrated evidence plan, and all our resources are available on the DIME website if individuals go through and they can their checklist, templates, examples, and case studies that helps them walk through. And then the second
Well,
was the evidence defined. This was created with executive leaders from payers, regulators, innovator groups, and evidence defined as a published framework in Nature Digital Medicine, one of the widest used framework for rapidly and rigorously assessing and evaluating clinical value for these digital health products and solutions. Um, it helps payers, health systems, and clinical colleagues essentially as they are making either coverage decisions, as they are thinking about implementing it within their health systems, or as companies are developing to create the right value for the product that they are building.
Okay, so that was excellent. Thank you very much for that. That really, I think, that will resonate with a lot of European companies. Collaboration is clearly central to Dime's mission for organizations, whether they're startups, pharma, regulators, academic partners. What's the best way to engage and work with Dime to meaningfully advance digital health?
Steven, you stole my words. Collaboration is definitely the bread and butter of what we believe, how we can drive progress of this field forward. And there are multiple different ways Dime collaborates on with organizations across the field, all the way from startups, innovator communities, payers, regulators, tech, pharma, through a few different arenas. One is through pre-competitive projects. So pre-competitive projects are essentially with the idea of one tide lifts multiple boats. So we identify core challenges in the field that is an impediment to multiple different organizations. What we say is we come together as a group, we solve this in a span of 6 months to 12 months, depending on how deep the problem is, and then we try to solve it together. So that is a model of pre-competitive collaboration. We have sponsorship. So we work with our sponsor colleagues and organizations one-on-one to think throughout the whole year, what are their core priorities and measurements. And then we have third piece, which is an advisory that we work with individual companies to help them tailor their strategy, tailor their evidence plan, tailor their go-to-market approach, and multiple different ways. Essentially, the goal is how can we be more than the sum of parts to drive this progress forward?
I love how you've explained how Dime identifies critical gaps in regulatory clarity for digital health technologies. And you've responded by publishing frameworks and tools that developers can use and align expectations from the FDA and other global regulators. I think that's something quite unique that I've noticed about your organization. And I think you've also described the democratization of best practice, which for me, you've created toolkits for evidence generation and endpoint validation and ethics too, I believe, used in AI. So that's going to help developers bring products to market faster and with greater credibility. Was there something else you'd like to add?
We try to, our goal, Stephen, thank you for asking. Our goal here is to essentially bring clarity, as you mentioned, through we have a US Reg Path resources as individuals are navigating regulations. It can be complex. Their guidance is available through FDA, through EMA, through global regulatory industry. But the challenge is how can innovators use these guidances, use these resources, and put it into action as they're building a product, as they're going to the market. One of the pieces that I would love to add on is we have Digital Medicine Academy that I welcome any individuals who are listening to it is we have tried to simplify a lot of these processes through various different educational courses that one can dive into. So as they are implementing AI, as they are looking into ethics for digital health, as they are looking into how to use sensor-based technologies to build a product and build and design their endpoints essentially in the place. So welcome and invite any of the listeners to learn more about Dime Medicine Academy, and we have over 7 different courses that walks you through in a short format, tightly packed, actionable insights that you can pick up from today and start implementing tomorrow.
I think that there are a lot of interesting things about Dime's model and its energy. And I think that integrating clinical patient-generated evidence and real-world data into a unified evidence package that you've created, it supports it through living documents, if you like, real-world time evidence, open access methods libraries, and industry standard frameworks. And you've managed to merge all of these together. Would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. I think one of the data remains as one of the foundation for a lot of discussions we are hearing on AI these days. To data is only as actionable and usable as relevant the data is in real time. So what we try to do here at Dime is um, keep a lot of these resources in the tool relevant to the growth and globalization of digital health as it's happening. So we have built a set of different libraries. So one is our digital clinicals library that walks through essentially as a home we update it every quarter, but we have collected and generated various kinds of across therapeutic areas, different tools that are being utilized, endpoints that are being collected through different sponsors in one go-to resource so that individuals, as they are identifying that or building a new endpoint, they don't know where to start. They can always go to the library, look at who has done the research, who is currently doing the research across what different phases, if it's a drug being developed or a special kind of DHT that's being used for specific therapeutic areas, say, for example, oncology space or rare diseases, that they can go to this library, they can filter this and look at what current research has been done, what currently is happening, and what need is still that no one has yet touched on as a part of it. And we have expanded this library into specific arenas with our partnership with the Parkinson's Society to look into um, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and nocturnal scratch and a few different therapeutic areas so that how do we advance this using right data sets in real time? And beyond that, what we have also done is case examples and case studies. One of the things we try to do is learn from the best practices of who has done it right and learn from the opportunities where we can improve through different case studies and through different examples, sitting down with innovators and developers and executives of the teams to map out over the last 5 to 7 years what they have done, what are the learnings, what strategies that they use for the case studies, and what were some of those outcomes. All the way in the regulatory side, we have over 15 plus case studies of products to the market that they have bring and commercialized in this space, to looking into the endpoints, how individuals have used endpoints and deployed it across different phases of clinical trials to also driving clinical research and medical device development forward.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Anything else that any other services you provide that I'm not aware of?
Steven, there's one, we call it our virtual first collaborative and community health connected health collaborative that we have recently launched. So right now there's a lot of focus. If you look at the time during pandemic, a lot of services went from in-person care to virtual care. During that time, early in the days of 2020, we had launched this virtual first care initiative impact that essentially brought together how do we redefine digitally enabled care in the state of art of what healthcare was happening. So we have payment and coverage toolkit that walks through individuals for European companies specifically who are listening to these podcasts as you are building digitally first enabled services and trying to look for reimbursement. We have a payment and reimbursement toolkits that walks through how can you contract with the first payer? What are the right CPT codes? We have a library that we have created, and who are different kinds of services and organizations in the market who are using these services in the place. So there's a whole library of marketplace as well being created under the Virtual First Care Network. So we constantly collaborate with multiple payers and keep a pulse of what are the new coverage and reimbursement that's coming out in the direction of it. That actually led to buildup of CHCC, which is our collaborative community in partnership with Consumer Tech Association, or CTA, which is one of the largest association here in the US, to look at what are the primordial challenges that exist in 2025. So we started with the first project on hospital at home. We heard hospital at home being one of the areas of the bottle concept of borderless hospitals that people wanted to dive into. So how do we use virtual first services and implement in a way from the tech stacks, from looking into what are the data flows that are coming in place when we think about hospital at home infrastructure, and then from the payment and coverage side, what are the right measures in place? So this is 6 months project. In the summer, we'll have some new resources available in place for hospital at home, and this CHCC community is something that we look for new different approaches of how do we drive progress forward with the more core problems that exist in today's world? Like we have another one coming up in aging in place of choice. We've heard about age tech being challenged so much in this space, and there's a misconception that aging population are disconnected with technology. I think the problem more is we have not created the right infrastructure, clinical, technical, or payment infrastructure that supports aging in place technologies in a more connected and a holistic format. So that's another project area that we will be working on as a part of the CHCC and a few more to come down the pike.
I'm very impressed. Thank you very much for that. That was an excellent answer. And I think I can direct a lot of people your way for that. So, Smit, it's been a great pleasure for me. Thank you very much for your time today. And I look forward to catching up with you maybe in a few months to find out other activities that the organizations engage with. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and look forward to discussing further.